We are proud of the great job that they are doing. We are proud of the sacrifice that have been made to put up with in the northeastern parts of the country, under-equipped and ill-provisioned. We are proud of them. We hail them for their patriotism. And we know they also share some of the pains that we too are going through as a people today. But, no mincing of words. There is something seriously wrong at the top. There's no question at all. The unfolding events of the last few days, in clear terms, has shown that there is some collusion between the top brass and the present political elite in government, the service chiefs and the present, thank you for that correction, the service chiefs and the present cabal in power in the PDP. That we will say without any apology at all. It is unusual for a military that is supposed to be clearly at the background, advising and assisting their commander-in-chief, to sit down and write a letter to an independent electoral body. It is totally unheard of. Totally unheard of. Okay, that goes for Benga's question. Bamidele, well, he has, at least when I attended the IPAC meeting, he was very clear about the fact that the only thing that will make him resign is if his honor is at stake. And I do not see that happening now. We think he has done a good job. His performance hasn't been faultless. But by and large, he has done a good job in the circumstances in which we operate in this country. And in the report that he gave us, he mentioned repeatedly resource constraints. But nobody picked up on that. So it is clear that he was also working under constraints of resources. So, by and large, we have confidence in him. And we will be sad. And we don't expect that he will be forced out of his position. Thank you. God bless you. I thank you for being with us this afternoon as we are passing through yet another critical moment in the history of our dear nation. We have gone through difficult times like this before in the past, and Nigeria has survived and come through even stronger. We are confident that we shall survive this one too, because no one, no matter how powerful, can subvert the collective will of the people. In our preliminary reactions earlier to the postponement of the 2015 general elections, originally slated for the 14th day of February, we noted that the decision taken by the Independent Electoral Commission has thrown up so many unanswered questions, and that these questions will be reviewed by the party, the APC, by the party organs for a comprehensive response. While the consultation within the party organs is going on, this briefing is to provide us the opportunity to raise some pertinent questions and put some issues in their proper perspective. You will recall that on the 22nd of January 2015, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, retired, the National Security Advisor, in faraway London Chatham House, declared that INEC was not ready for the elections, and he was therefore advising the electoral body to undertake a postponement. The reason he gave for this unsolicited advice was that substantial numbers of registered voters had not collected their permanent voters' cards, PVC. He did not say anything, nothing at all, about about security concerns. Though Boko Haram, of course, we all know, was already an issue. Was already an issue then as it is now. So the question arises, at what point did concern over elections shift from PVC to security? You will recall that when the United States Secretary of State, John Kerry, visited us in January 25, he wanted a categorical commitment for President Jonathan that the elections will be held as scheduled. The president assured the American envoy that the elections would indeed hold. Was it that the security chiefs had not briefed him at that point in time about the security situation in the country and how this would affect the election timetable at the time he was making this commitment? On the 2nd of February, at the National Peace Committee meeting in Abuja with representatives of different political parties, the service chiefs gave the assurance of their readiness for the elections. At that occasion, the Chief of Defense Staff, Air Marshal Alex Bade, gave assurances of the armed forces' preparedness for the elections. According to him, even though we are busy in the Northeast, we also have capabilities across the nation. Bade also admitted that the role of the military is merely to support the police in providing security during elections. At the same event, the Chief of Army Staff, General Kenneth Minima, said, and I quote, "We are aware of the need for security before, during, and after the elections. We will deploy across the states of the Federation in areas we discover that have capacity for violence. We are prepared to ensure we have peaceful elections." End of quote. Also speaking at the event, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Vice Marshal Adeshola Amosun, said, again I quote, "We have commenced the airlift of materials needed for the elections, starting from Abuja. We will continue with the elections." The sum total of this is that only 12 days before the elections, and despite the state of insecurity in the Northeast, the entire military high command assured the nation of their readiness to provide security for the elections. However, only 3 days later, on Friday, February 6th, these same security chiefs wrote to INEC in a letter which by all practical purposes could be described as pure blackmail, saying that they would no longer be able to provide security for the elections. What happened, one may ask, in those 72 hours that brought about this complete turn around? It is important to note that the National Council of States meeting on Thursday, February 5th, INEC reaffirmed its readiness and commitment to hold the elections as scheduled. Even though the service chief briefed the council that they had security concerns, the consensus of opinion in that august body of eminent citizens was that elections should go ahead nationwide, except in the 14 local governments identified as problematic by the same security chiefs. After all, it was recalled that in 1999, elections were not held in Bayelsa State because of the activities of militants at that time, but it held all over the rest of the country. The activities of Boko Haram were clearly limited and are still limited to 14 local governments in 3 states out of 774 local governments in 36 states and the FCT. How would this then warrant the blanket postponement of elections in the entire country? Considering all the factors building up to this postponement, it is difficult not to come to the very obvious conclusion, that the military high command is in an unholy and dangerous alliance with the ruling party, the PDP, to subvert the democratic will of the people of this great nation. We have no doubt that the letter sent to INEC, warning it not to proceed with the elections, emanated from the Joint Chiefs' hands of ESWA and President Jonathan's voice of Jacob. Isn't it curious that only the PDP and its supporters are today celebrating the postponement? We know that at the Council of State meeting, all the former heads of state in attendance spoke against the postponement, except in the 14 local governments as stated earlier. And all the former chief justices also concurred. And every non-PDP governor present at that meeting spoke against the postponement. PVC collection, an issue that they have also raised. Another issue that has been brought up is the distribution of permanent voters' cards. The federal government and the ruling party have made a song and dance of the challenges INEC has had with the distribution and sought to underplay the achievements of the electoral body in this respect. The truth is that average national collection of the PVC today, in fact, as at the time the elections were being annulled, stood between 65 and 70%, which would increase in the week or almost 10 days that were remaining before the elections took place. According to INEC, this level of collection actually reflects a better voter participation than in the previous election in 2011. The question we then ask is, what threshold is acceptable? In any case, this is a democratic country, and the democracy protects the right of every citizen to pick up or refuse to pick up his or her PVC. If a citizen refuses to do so, should INEC be blamed for that lapse or for that choice, democratic choice? Let's go to the role of security agencies. It is clear that the greatest threat to our democracy today is the way the ruling party has compromised the leadership of the Nigerian security services to serve the personal agenda of President Jonathan. This is a highly dangerous game. A recent court judgment in Sokoto State clearly ruled that the military has no role in the electoral process. What happened with this postponement is that the service chiefs simply vetoed a democratic process on the directive, clearly, of President Jonathan. We know what politicization is doing to our once proud security institution. It says military here, but the entire security service. We are aware that the presidency has forwarded a secret memo to to all commanders of divisions and battalions of the Nigerian Army for a 3-day strategy meeting in Kaduna from today on how to use the military to intimidate voters in APC states so as to facilitate the rigging of the election in favor of President Jonathan. Some recent revelations about the role of the military in Ekiti election is demonstrable proof of how far the government will go to compromise the military as an institution. Could it be that when the service chief said that they would not have enough personnel to provide security for elections, what they were actually saying is that they would not have enough soldiers to intimidate voters in favor of the ruling party if the elections had proceeded as scheduled? Clearly divided we stand. Question. Never in the history of our country has a federal government and the president of Nigeria so wantonly mobilized ethnic, religious sentiments to divide the people against themselves for very selfish political reasons. By now, everyone is aware how a close confidant of President Jonathan, Chief Edwin Clark, called for the sack and arrest of the chairman of INEC because, according to him, the INEC chairman is working for the interests of the North. He said this under the aegis of a recent meeting of the Southern People's Assembly. We are also aware of how the Vice President of Nigeria, architect Nnamdi Sambo, unfortunately invoked religious sentiment to campaign for his party in Niger State. The level of ethnic and religious baiting that we are currently experiencing is unprecedented in the political history of our dear nation. The road to Rwanda and other countries that have suffered tragic ethno-religious conflicts is not far from what the PDP is currently invoking on our nation. And I want to say at that point, God forbid. We owe it as a duty to stress the point that under our watch, with an APC government in place, Nigerians, regardless of their ethnic origin or religious disposition, will be free to operate without let or hindrance. Only a few days ago, the director of the National Information Center, Mr. Mike Omeri, claimed that government has uncovered a plan by Boko Haram to bomb polling centers without providing a single shred of evidence. The following day, President Jonathan declared in a church in Lagos that Boko Haram has planned to bomb the entire country. We see this as deliberate scaremongering of the worst type, aimed at discouraging Nigerians from coming out to exercise their democratic right to vote. This, to say the least, is quite unfortunate. The president should be protecting the people and assuring them of their safety. The president should be protecting the people and assuring them of their safety. Is now the one scaring them. Clearly, we are at the beginning of the making of a constitutional crisis. It is important to note that the service chief's letter to INEC demanded postponement for at least 6 weeks. This, we must note, is clearly a booby trap. Embedded in that phrase, at least, is a window to push for another postponement. It is clear, however, that any further postponement can only lead to a constitutional crisis of major proportions. The Constitution provides for at least 30 days before the handover date, May 29th, for an election to be held. We have strong suspicions, in fact stronger than suspicions, but hope that this postponement is not part of the agenda to generate this constitutional crisis in the country. We are just recently recovering from a crisis precipitated by the famous June 12th crisis. We cannot afford another. We are also witnesses to the way INEC was intimidated into postponement of the elections despite repeated assurances of its readiness. We are aware of worse plans for intimidation in the days ahead. We are aware of plans to intimidate and orchestrate the arrest of our leaders across the country on frivolous grounds. We are now aware of how the PDP used intimidation and arrest to rig the last governorship elections in Ekiti State. We are aware that this is the plan of the PDP in the current phase we're in. But we have no doubt at all, we have absolute faith that Nigerians will stand up to this. We have no doubt that the international community is also watching. So, what is our position? This postponement comes with a huge cost to all Nigerians and everyone involved directly or indirectly in the election, including international observers and journalists. However, we should see this as a sacrifice that we need to make for the survival of democracy in our dear motherland. We must remain steadfast and committed to the cause of change. Like our presidential candidate, General Buhari, said, our desire for change must surpass our desperation, their desperation, to hold on to power at all costs. We have no other country other than Nigeria, and we must remain focused to salvage it. End of quote. Gentlemen of the press, the contradictions we have tried to point out and highlight in this briefing represent a clear and present danger to our democracy. It is clear that there is a surreptitious but badly disguised attempt to subvert the will of the people. But we must assure Nigerians and friends of Nigeria all over the world that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. We are going through difficult times now, but I want to assure the people of this nation that this too we shall overcome.